Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and today I'm so delighted to have Kerry Docherty with us. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She co-founded the lifestyle clothing brand Faherty with her husband and his identical twin. A graduate of Yale University and Pepperdine Law School, she is passionate about community building, sustainability, and creativity. Kerry is also the author of the children's book Somewhere Right Now, featuring art by New York Times bestselling illustrator Susie Mason. She lives with her husband and 2 children on the New Jersey shore, where she is constantly looking for sea glass, and her memoir, Selfish, Unlearning, Reclaiming, and Telling the Truth, is a fascinating and really compelling read. And so let's get into it. Welcome, Kerry.
So happy to be here.
So I have to start with the title.
Yes.
Okay, Selfish. I love it. I love it. I'm a big believer in changing the game. What did they say in Mad Men? They said something like, if you don't like it, you change the conversation. So talk to me about picking the title, owning the title, and a little nutshell about the book.
The word selfish is so triggering to so many people. And it's often a term I feel like applied to women more than men. A man who sacrifices everything for his business, who's not at home at night with the kids, who's building capitalistic success, is named ambitious. But a woman who self-prioritizes, who takes care of herself, who says what she needs, that word selfish, I think, is especially a label given because there is a societal expectation, and I feel like a lot of women will agree with me, that we are supposed to be selfless. We are supposed to tend and put other people's needs before ourselves. I mean, the word itself, selfless, means like not having ourself, having less of ourself because we are giving so much to other people. So that's how it came to the title. We went back and forth about whether it would be called The Selfish Wife or Selfish, but my identity is so much transcends wife, and so we kept it to one word.
And The Selfish Wife, it felt a little trad wife.
Exactly. Well, it was supposed to be a little subversive and challenging the trad wife model, but I think one-word titles are great.
Absolutely. So do you want to give a little bit more of an explanation of the book, so that of your memoir?
Sure. So the book really explores what it means to be selfish, both in marriage, motherhood, business, creativity, and longing. And it is not a self-help book. I always say that. It is a messy and complicated journey of what happens when I start to put myself first and the consequences of that. And some of the consequences are significant. I always say the most selfish thing I could have done was to actually write and publish this book, because it recounts a time in my life and in my marriage that was really hard. It will forever be memorialized
You talk about so much. You talk about motherhood and marriage and relationships and yourself in relation to all that. The beginning of your book, where you start in a counseling session with your husband talking about how you wanted to be paid fairly.
Right.
And why did you decide to start the book with that scene?
Well, as I know you love craft, and I had been in a writing collective for years, Brooklyn Writings Collective. And Molly Rosen, who's my teacher, she often encourages us to start with a rupture. Start with the rupture. And obviously, there are many, many more ruptures in this book, but that really began the beginning of unraveling, I think, of both myself and my husband's relationship and getting to the grit of what are our needs and are they being met?
And so you go through this process of talking about that a woman could be almost like sculpted, like clay, into a certain type. And you even give an example of your own pubic hair.
TMI? Is it too TMI?
It's really a literal metaphor, but it's also figurative.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of those choices that you're making these choices? And maybe they're selfish, maybe it's not, but it always seems to be making a choice to please someone else. And you identify as a people pleaser.
Exactly. I grew up middle child. I was always the child that was fine, the Enneagram 9, the peacemaker, tending to everyone else's needs. Was an athlete, got recruited to play lacrosse at Yale. And I say in the book, I entered Yale a high achieving, obedient virgin. Anything I needed to do, I would do it, and I would do it with a smile on my face. And college was such an interesting social experiment because I really saw then how women were supposed to look, how were they were supposed to dress in order to be consumed by men. We
Yes.
would put on tiny skirts and stand outside in the freezing weather, hoping to get into the bar we wanted, hoping to be chosen. The first time I made out with my now husband, and we've come a long way, he made a reference of like, wow, there's a lot of hair down there. And
Yes.
I hadn't gotten the memo. I grew up in like a pretty traditional conservative family in the suburbs of Buffalo. I didn't get the memo that there was any way that my vulva was supposed to be maintenance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I didn't know that my bra and underwear was supposed to match, even though Victoria's Secret was telling us it was supposed to match.
It's a great way to show the inner turmoil or the inner struggles that you were dealing with by showing the physical manifestation of how you were addressing it. And you use such specificity. And I always say that, specificity really makes the difference in painting a scene. You do both. You have the reflection and you have the scene. And I think that throughout, you're using different tools and tactics to paint the picture of what you're going through, even from the point of view of dreams. So, how
Mhm.
was that decision to use the dream? And you do something what I coined the echo effect. You use a dream in the beginning and you mention it again, and then you have it at the end, and you have changed throughout each time the dream is mentioned.
Can I just say, I've been doing a lot of podcasts. I love talking about craft. And so these questions just like bring me to life that you have seen some of these things and want to talk about it. So the echo effect, I hadn't even heard that term, but the dreams reflect our subconscious. And I'm not someone who loves hearing about other people's dreams. So I wanted to keep the dreams very short. And I didn't interpret them in the book. I let the reader interpret them as they want, but there is something very haunting about these dreams. I'd share about one at a young age. I witnessed in my dream a young woman swimming out to sea, and I could tell she was going to drown herself.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that dream meant for decades, and it kept appearing to me over and over and over again. And I share later in the book that I did like a past lives regression, and I got to unveil the significance of that dream. But there's something haunting about the dreams that I share. And I think it builds the suspense for the book of like what might be brooding.
Absolutely. And I think in one place, one dream, your sister comments on it. She makes a comment. And the other ones are just kind of left. But we do see there's an emotional change by the next time
Right.
that it's mentioned. So that progression is happening that's supporting it. And you said at the end that he was processing, he took time, Alex took time to process the book because there was a lot in there. There was stuff that he knew from, you had written letters to each other and you talked about that at the end, but there was maybe some that he didn't know or that you hadn't shared. And how did that, obviously it's past that process now, but how did that go? Was that a difficult journey for the two of you to go on together?
Absolutely. And just to loop the listener in, if they haven't read the book, not a big part, but a part of the book explores this ambiguous relationship I had with the musician, Bo, that really challenged, it really crossed lines
Yeah.
in my marriage.
I got it because I had a relationship with a musician in Denver before I ever met my husband. But he was a musician. He ended up like moving to Mexico and living in his car and briefly doing things like that. I know Bo is a very successful musician, but he was a muse for me and brought out my creative side, which seems to be what Bo did for you, because your relationship with your husband, you were very involved in the business. I mean, you're a co-founder of the business and you did everything. And you really talk about how a business is started and the sweat and blood and tears and everything that has to go into it. And you did that all. And so there was probably no healthy separation between your dreams, his dreams,
Right.
and your creativity, which
Right.
wasn't always, you had two voting against you at all times. Am I assessing that correct?
Exactly. You perfectly summed it up. Yeah. Yeah. I was so enmeshed in building the business and family dynamics and there were so many amazing parts of it. I don't deny there were so many amazing parts of it and parts that brought me alive. And there were also parts of myself that I started to ignore, that I started to repress. And when we repress things, they come out in other ways. And you see the struggle of me yearning to access a part of my creativity that remained dormant. And so Bo really was a mirror for me of, oh, wait a second, you're an artist and you can alchemize all your painful thoughts into art. What if I could do something like that?
And it ultimately, he went on with his life, you went on with your life, but it could have been a big rift in your marriage.
100%. And I think a lot of readers will relate to the feeling of crossroads when we make decisions and what are we fighting for and what are we choosing. And there are so many different lives that any of us could have lived at any given time. And I think there were times with my relationship with Bo that I felt like I was at a crossroads and I didn't have clarity necessarily of which way it was going to go. And also it's a happy ending for me, Alex
Yes.
and I are still together. And this book, even though it's been painful to recount some of those past memories, it's allowed for a real intimacy that I don't think we would have ever gotten to had we not been so honest.
Wow. And what about your mother? How is she with you revealing stuff about your brother?
For both my mom and dad, my dad is such a private person, and I was the most worried about him. My dad's 82 years old, and I was like, this book is going to give him a heart attack. Like, I am talking about my vulva. I'm talking about crossing lines in my marriage. I am revealing family secrets.
Yeah.
And his and my mom's response have been so loving, and it's healed something in me. But it could have gone the other way. And I've had family members read the book and they're very, very mad at me. And I don't know if our relationship will ever be repaired.
See, I've heard that a lot
Yeah.
when somebody comes out, but you assess the risks, I guess, and
I
based.
think you assess the risk, and I think it helps you evaluate what relationships are at their core and
Right.
what relationships have an expansive idea of what love and forgiveness and honesty look like. And I think if you want to know where things lie, write a book about your life, and it will be the great recalibration. You will see what relationships are worth preserving and fighting for.
Absolutely. There's a dichotomy in you, right? So you were
Mhm.
raised as the good girl, you went to law school, you met him in college, and yet you have this other side that wanted to just leave all the work responsibilities behind and go to the Ojai spa. I've been there, great
Right.
spa, and do all these different things, explore your poetry, do the things that please you. And there was always this pull, and
Yeah.
you show that throughout the book. And I think a lot of people will be able to relate because we are made up of multitudes as women.
Yeah.
And we're not just one thing. And I especially loved and appreciated that you talked about motherhood, early motherhood, as perhaps not being the best job in the world and being a bit claustrophobic. And because I related to that completely. You're so happy to have this baby, but then it's just a lot of legwork.
It's so laborious. It's so
It's
laborious.
the day my daughter, and she wasn't that old, picked up her bottle by herself, I was like, yes, one less
Freedom.
thing,
Freedom.
freedom. Absolutely. And I was never one of those mothers either. I came to motherhood late in my 40s. So I was never one of these moms who went, it's just my whole identity. It never
Right.
was. And so I think so many women, especially today, need permission to own all the parts of themselves. You wouldn't think, right? Because when did women's liberation start? In the 60s? But I think because the change in the world and technology and everything, I don't know. There's something that's changed that women have to almost fight for who they are, the pieces of who they are. And I think you writing this book shows people that it's okay. You're redefining what it means and not letting men, as Alex tried to do, weaponize the word selfish, right?
Yes, I think you sharing, the multitudes of women and the different identities and roles we have and our different competing needs and desires. The self is so layered, and there are so many different parts of me, whether it's different ages in me that still exist that want some type of need to be met, different dreams I have, and the self is complicated.
Yeah.
And how are we just bringing those different parts of ourselves to the table? And it's not perfectly packaged. And sometimes there's inner dialogue happening, but allow all those parts of ourselves to have a seat at the table. It doesn't mean that they all have the same voice. We have to make sure, and this is part of the book, that the part of ourselves that is most mature in making the decision that will be best for who we are has the
Yeah.
biggest seat at the table. And often that's one that is centered in love and centered in service and optimism and passion. But it's a
Yeah.
journey to figure out all these different parts of ourselves.
And I feel that that's the mindfulness coach part of you coming out also. And you really did a great job incorporating the spiritual elements into it, the tarot, the past life regression, the dreams, even the story about Grandpa Bob. I love that. Do you know how many people I've told that story to? I love that story. Can you share that story a little bit?
Oh, I know. It still gives me the chills. So, my grandfather was in the process of dying, and he was dying at home. And so we had family around. And one day, right before he passed, my grandma went in and sat by his side. They've been married for over 70 years and looked at her husband. And she said, and she had a little bit of vodka next to her. Pain medication, quell any withdrawal, just a little sip of vodka. My grandpa Bob, opened his eyes and she looked at her husband and she said, Bob, tell me I'm wonderful. And he nodded. He was in and out of lucidity, and he nodded. And she looked at him again and she said, "Tell me I'm wonderful." And he repeated it slowly out loud. And she brought the little bit of vodka to his lips. And she walked out in such satisfaction. And it was just a woman who wanted to hear that she was wonderful, to feel affirmed, to be seen. And I think this book is so much about a woman, me, wanting to be seen.
Yes, I think so many people will relate to it. So how did you interweave all that spiritual stuff into the scenes and the book? What were the choices? Here we're talking craft now. What were the choices of how to do it? Did you have a separate document or folder with all those spiritual meditation? How did you structure it? That's what I want to know.
I still don't know how I wrote this book. I had one Google document for the most part. And I had collected over the years a lot of essays. And then I have tons of journals, and I'm an avid chronicler of my life. And my journals are very cuckoo la la spiritual based. That's where my dreams and my tarot readings and everything lie. So my biggest thing was remembering the memory and writing it down. And then yes, I think layering. It's this act of layering. And I don't think it was so conscious where I was like, okay, insert mindfulness here, insert spiritual here. But this idea of braided narrative and pulling back, weaving through a memoir as a tapestry, weaving through threads of memory versus threads of scenes versus threads of dreams versus threads of mindfulness. And I wanted this book to be steeped in spirituality, but in a way that was me in the process.
Right. It's not distant, it's within who you are as a person and even how you're interacting with the company culture.
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. So infusing it into each scene without theoreticizing it or being like, mindfulness is the practice of do 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 do.
No, it wasn't like that at all. It's very well woven. Would you say that it was hard to decide what to put in and what to take out? Did you leave a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor?
I definitely cut some scenes. There were scenes that I really wanted in there, and my editor was like, this just doesn't move the narrative further. It was helpful for me to be like, guess what? I can write another book and I can put this in another book in the future. Maybe it'll be a novel. There were scenes I cut because I knew other people would be very upset if they were in those scenes. And there's a responsibility and accountability to being a memoirist of that real fact. So there was definitely a lot left off the table, but nothing that I felt like would significantly change the arc of the book. But, as writers, we have favorite lines, we have favorite characters and scenes. But at the end of the day, I had to be like, is this very significant to the arc of the book? And if not, you can't hang on to anything too tightly.
So talk to me about the narrative. When you said moving the narrative along, what do you mean by that?
I very much wrote this book as it's very plot driven. And I think some memoirs are to really showcase a person's life from a specific lens, and it depends the reason why that memoirist wants to do that. I wanted it to be a propulsive read. I wanted to have strong character development. And I don't even know if I was so conscious of this when I was writing it, but I knew the types of books that I love to read.
What are some of those?
I love fiction. I love, I Heart the Lover is so good. I love poetry. So I wanted to write a book where the reader was like, some of this behavior is questionable, and I don't know which way she's going to go. Like, you don't know how it might end.
Yes, and the best memoir does read like a novel. So there was all these moments of suspense, particularly with the relationship with Bo, the musician, that you wove throughout, and that really comes to a head. It is the same timeline, but it's kind of its own little narrative
Yeah,
within the story. Would you agree with that?
absolutely. And I also heard a writing advice once about every chapter, almost every scene should have some type of triangle. There should be some type of tension. And it can either be with the character and other people or the character and other parts of ourselves. And I think in good writing, you are always feeling attention. It doesn't have to be explicit. The tension can be in a dream, but where is the tension? And when I look back at my life, I have a lot of tense moments. I put that on the page.
Yeah. And you talk about identity, but in a way that very specific to you, right? You're not talking about somebody else's identity. It's your identity as a business person, as a mother, as a wife, as a creative person, and building a fast growing company was all part of that.
Yeah.
When you were writing about it, did you want to do things in your head to protect the company? I know that sounds weird to say, but
That does not sound weird. That has been a heavy topic of conversation. In order to write this book, I had to completely disassociate from what the consequences might be or how other people might view me, how other people might view the brand. And so every day I woke up and I wrote, what needs to be said and what am I not saying that I need to write? And then I put together the draft and I started to share it. And it was very much, whoa, 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 Kerry. We have a family founded brand and it is very well known. We have 84 stores. Stella, you've been to one of the stores.
yes,
We have employees and you are sharing intimate parts of our lives and
yeah.
questionable behavior. Can that cause reputational damage to the brand?
Was that more Alex or was it more Mike, his identical twin brother?
I think they were both concerned. I mean, this has really been their dream.
Yes,
And I have so much compassion for them. We've all built this, but this was their childhood dream.
yes.
And now Kerry, one of the co-founders, is writing about a book about her life, and Farity's a character in it. And I'm speaking to you at a time when the book is not out yet.
Yes.
We still do not know how people are going to respond. Now, I believe in trust women, and I believe that women are so thirsty for authenticity above aspiration. And also, there might be people who read this book and distill it down to a couple things that they think makes the brand look bad. That is a risk that I'm taking.
Right. How involved are you with the brand these days? Are you doing the meditation workshops that you had started doing with them, at least when you wrote about them in the book?
Well, the second I get off this call, we have a team meeting and I'm interviewing three amazing women at Farity around about being a woman and their identity and the things that they've navigated. So this brand was my first baby and I'm so close to so many of our teams. And even though I'm starting my creative pursuit, like I'm still in love with this brand and what we're building. So I don't know if that will ever change.
So you write about desire and you write about sex. And are there things that you're thinking, I want to amend that? Are you thinking about the kids? Do you worry about them reading it at some point?
The first draft had juicier sex scenes. And did you read Miranda July's All Fours?
I have
Oh,
not.
it's so good and juicy. And so I had just come off of reading, and that's a novel, by the way. But
Okay.
I really kind of allowed myself as a writer to like go big. And I found myself starting to pull back a little bit. I didn't want the sex scenes to in any way distract from what I
Yeah.
was really trying to share, which is, a question of spiritual identity. So I was mindful of that. And in terms of my kids, Alex and I are very transparent with our kids. They've heard a lot of conversations around this book in our home. I don't know what's going to come of it. They're 100% going to be in therapy one day, being like, I remember when mom wrote a book and mom and dad were talking about this. But I think one thing we've taught our kids is number one, the power of honesty. I don't think in any way our kids feel triangulated in our discussions. I've even said to Ava, some people are going to read this book and not like it. And how do you feel about that? And she's like, I don't know, mom. People don't like things all the time. There's a matter of factness.
It's very
She's
practical.
very practical. As someone who grew up in a house with a lot of secrets, and I think Alex grew up in a household where marital dynamics really affected him as a kid. I want to be in a household where our children feel safe to have all emotions. We can talk about hard things. And also they are seeing their parents deeply love and respect each other. And even if there's disagreements, a trust that deep resentment or anger or vengefulness isn't unfolding.
I love that you wrote an epigraph that kind of tying in with what's happened with everyone, what's happened with you.
Yeah.
How have you changed as a result of writing this book?
I have changed so much. The book's not even out yet. When this goes live, it will be, but
I
I
will
think
be.
there's a whole another journey I'm about to go on, which is one thing to write things down and excavate. The practice of writing a book is a excavation. It is an archaeological dig. And you start to like, I'm going to write this memory down, and then it leads you somewhere else, and then it leads you somewhere else. And so when I first started writing this book, I don't even think I knew the core parts of what I would share. I am changed in the sense that I feel so steadfast in my belief that my creativity is worth pursuing and it's worth sharing, and that the idea of self is even larger than I could possibly imagine.
That's beautiful. And what final question, what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to write their own story?
Keep writing, just write it down. You don't need to know all the characters. You don't need to know the plot right away. Start writing and it will reveal itself to you. There's only one difference between people who want to write a book and people who do write a book.
They write.
They write. So get to writing.
That's great. Well, this has been such a pleasure and selfish. And everyone really needs to look at this book and look at it in terms of what we think the culture says that women should be and do, and what the reality is, and what the true meaning of the word is or should be. Thank you so much, Kerry.
Thanks for having me.
Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.